A fine rain dripped down the tinted windows of his car as he left the brightly lit mansion, where loud music and laughter drowned out any hint of suspicion. Inside, his wife toasted influential guests, flashing the impeccable smile of someone who believes she controls everything. But he, with his heart racing and a forbidden desire burning in his chest, drove toward a small apartment in the suburbs. The maid waited for him anxiously, with a look that blended innocence and danger. It was supposed to be just another secret night, an escape from the gilded monotony. But on that journey, a forgotten detail would become the thin line between pleasure and ruin. As he climbed the narrow steps of that worn-down building, he felt his cell phone vibrate in his pocket. He didn't answer. He didn't want anything to interrupt the moment. He didn't know that just a few kilometers away, something had already been set in motion. A simple, banal oversight of his, yet one that would expose every lie, every encounter, every message. That very night, the truth would take silent form, ready to walk through his door before he even returned. And when it did, there would be no explanations that could erase the bitter taste of fate. If this story has captivated you thus far, imagine what's to come. Like and subscribe to the channel now. The mansion rose like a temple of luxury under the night sky, surrounded by rows of imported cars and flashing lights that twinkled like artificial stars. In the main hall, crystal chandeliers reflected golden light on made-up faces and champagne flutes, while music mingled with the buzz of conversation. There, among politicians, businessmen, and socialites, she stood, the impeccable wife, the perfect hostess, parading in a red dress that seemed made for the role of the untouchable woman. Her eyes roamed the room, greeting with calculated smiles, but at no point did they notice that, on the other side, he was no longer there. The millionaire everyone, admired as a symbol of success, slipped out of that scene like a discreet thief, leaving behind not only the party, but also the woman who thought she knew him. Outside, the cold air enveloped him like an invitation to danger. He hurried across the courtyard to his car, feeling the weight of what he'd been doing for months. Each step was accompanied by the distant echo of the party music, fading away like a world he belonged to, but no longer satisfied. He started the engine, and as he drove away, the reflection of the mansion grew smaller in the rearview mirror, while on his cell phone on the seat, the screen lit up, displaying a notification he ignored. The city was asleep in parts, but in the suburbs, a light was on, waiting for him. She, the maid, lived in a small apartment with thin walls and simple furniture, a world where he claimed to find what he called truth. The relationship had grown out of lingering glances in the kitchen, accidental touches in the hallway, and conversations in the backyard, far from listening ears. It wasn't innocent love, nor was it just desire. It was the feeling that, with her, he could be someone without a mask, even though he knew it was destroying him inside. As he approached the building, anxiety mixed with excitement, and he wondered for a moment if that night might be his last. He didn't know it yet, but a simple, overlooked detail in that luxurious house itself was already working against him, like an invisible thread, pulling fate toward an inevitable outcome. For the first few months, everything seemed like a silent, exciting game. She would lower her gaze when he entered the kitchen, but not before letting out a quick, almost imperceptible smile, as if confessing a wordless secret. He, accustomed to being served with reverence and distance, began to notice the details. The way she tied her hair back with a pencil when her hands were full, the way she hummed softly as she cleaned the hallway, and the way her eyes changed color in the morning light. She wasn't a magazine beauty, but there was something about her that dismantled him, and it was precisely this naturalness that captivated him and made him cross the line he swore he would never cross. The first touch was accidental, a shifting of objects in the kitchen. His hand brushed hers, and neither of them moved away too quickly. It was at that moment that the atmosphere shifted, as if an invisible field of tension had been activated. From then on, their conversations lengthened, always with the door half open, always careful not to be seen. And when the first message arrived on her cell phone with his name, the danger ceased to be theoretical and began to have a set date and time. He invented meetings, short trips, any excuse to escape the gilded routine that suffocated him. With her, he didn't need to wear impeccable suits or talk about investments and politics. He just had to sit on the worn sofa, hear her laugh, smell the cheap coffee, and forget for a few hours that he was a man watched by everyone. But this relief came at a price, the paranoia of being discovered. Sometimes he thought his wife noticed something. Other times, he was certain she was too busy with her own social life to notice. What he didn't know was that, in that world of luxury and etiquette, nothing went unnoticed for long. The mansion's staff was like a living organism. Every glance, every whisper, every closed door fed the invisible stream of information, and all it would take was a miscalculated gesture, a simple oversight for a thread in this network to be pulled and everything to come to light. That night, as he prepared to meet her, he didn't realize he'd already left that small flaw behind, hidden among the party's brightly lit corridors. A detail that, to the right eyes, would be more revealing than any confession. The forgotten detail wasn't something grand. It wasn't explicit evidence like a photograph or a letter. It was all the more treacherous precisely because it was banal. Before leaving for the party, he had left his wristwatch on the dresser in the bedroom, a unique model, a gift from his wife for their 10th wedding anniversary, with a small engraving on the inside, "Forever L&M." An accessory he wore to almost every important event, and one that was easily recognized by those who knew him well. While getting ready to leave in the middle of the party, in a hurry and with his mind focused on the forbidden encounter, he left his watch on the side table in the mansion's kitchen. A simple gesture passing by to get his coat, he removed the watch, placed it next to a folded napkin, and walked away without a second thought. But minutes after he left, his wife went to the kitchen to check if the dessert service was ready. It was then that her eyes fell on that out-of-place object, small, metallic, cold. She knew that watch like she knew her own breath. She found it strange to see it there, when it should have been attached to her husband's wrist, who in theory was taking care of something urgent at the office. She said nothing. She picked up the watch carefully, as if handling a piece of evidence, and discreetly slipped it into her dress pocket. She continued walking through the house, smiling at the guests, but now her mind was elsewhere. The watch's gleam wasn't just in its polished metal. It was in the memory of where she'd last seen that same object outside the house. On the laundry counter, weeks before, the same night she'd noticed a strange feminine perfume lingering on his shirt. Meanwhile, in the car, he continued on, unaware that he had left behind more than just a prop. He had left a concrete clue, a thread of truth waiting to be pulled. And in that mansion, where appearances were cultivated like rare flowers, a detail like that could blossom into something far more poisonous. The building's narrow hallway smelled of dampness and stale coffee. He climbed the stairs slowly, not out of fatigue, but to savor every second of anticipation. On the 3rd floor, the door was already ajar, and a beam of yellow light leaked through the crack, as if inviting him into a refuge known only to the two of them. Pushing open the door, he found her leaning against the wall, wearing a simple cotton dress that revealed the soft contours of her shoulders. Her hair was tied up awkwardly, a few loose strands falling across her face, and she had that shy smile that seemed like a whisper before the doorbell. He entered, closing the door carefully, as if sealing a silent pact. The distant sound of traffic mingled with the hiss of the kettle on the stove. She offered him a cup of coffee, but he waved it away, moving closer until he felt the warmth of her body. The kiss came quickly, as if they had both been trying to hold back the impulse for hours. There, among the peeling walls and worn furniture, he felt a freedom he couldn't find in marble halls. They sat on the sofa that creaked with every movement. She talked about her day, about small work problems and dreams that seemed unattainable, while he listened as if those stories were an escape from life itself. In his pocket, his cell phone vibrated again. He didn't even look at it. In the world they inhabited for a few hours, there was no wife, no party, no business, just the warmth of two bodies who knew they belonged in opposite places. Outside, the night was deepening, and the wind was rattling against the fragile windows. He believed they were safe, protected by distance and discretion. But across town, in the illuminated mansion, someone had already crossed the line between suspicion and certainty. His wife, her watch hidden in her purse and her face impeccably serene, watched the party like a strategist waiting for the right moment to strike. He didn't know it, but as he laughed with the waitress, he was more exposed than he'd ever been. And in that intimate stillness, the silence began to grow heavy, as if the air itself knew none of this would remain hidden for long. The party continued with the same energy as before, but for her, every face, every laugh, every toast was now a blur. She walked through the ballroom with elegant strides, greeting guests as if nothing had changed, while the cold weight of the watch in her dress pocket reminded her every second that something had broken. As she passed the hall mirror, she straightened her hair and attempted a smile that hid a whirlwind. Her eyes, however, held a different gleam, not of sadness but of calculation. She wasn't the type to confront with shouting. She preferred silence and patience, knowing that revenge, well served, tasted most intense when tempered by time. In the past, she had noticed small changes in her husband. The way he avoided eye contact when he arrived late, the abrupt way he changed the subject, the strange scent on his clothes. But she lacked tangible proof, something that couldn't be denied, with the oratorical skill he so mastered. And now there in her hand, the detail he had forgotten was more than enough to ignite the flame of a plan. As the maitre d' announced the opening of the dance floor, she discreetly slipped away, heading upstairs to the mansion. She entered his office and began to examine his meticulously tidy desk, as always. She turned on the lamp, opened drawers, and leafed through diaries. She wasn't looking for just anything. She was looking for patterns. And she found them. A set of receipts folded in the back of a drawer, all from the same remote neighborhood. The dates and times matched his absences. She put everything away with the same discretion she'd used when she'd entered and went back downstairs, resuming her role as the perfect hostess. Downstairs, a group of friends were chatting about their travels, and she joined in as if nothing had happened, laughing at the right moment, offering toasts. But inside, every word she uttered was just another layer of the mask that hid the gathering storm. In the corner, watching her from afar, one of the club's security guards noticed something different about her posture. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe it was the way she seemed less interested in the party. He didn't know it, but that same man would unwittingly become an essential part of the chain of events that was about to unfold. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, he continued to believe he was protected by thin walls and the dark night, not realizing that the first stone had already been thrown, and there would be no turning back. She decided she wouldn't lose anything by raising her voice. Silence, in that universe of frozen smiles and contractual promises, was the most cutting weapon. She descended the mansion stairs as if she'd left a handkerchief upstairs and retrieved it leisurely, resumed dancing with a cordial senator, bowed her head in time to the music, and calculated the time it would take her husband to make the journey to the suburbs. Inside, the plan was taking shape with the cold precision of a scalpel. There would be no scene, no crying in the hallway. There would be method. She waited for the party to cool down, thanked the vendors personally, watched the lights go out one by one. And when the house breathed the silence of afterglow, she entered his office for the second time that night. She opened his laptop with the password she knew by ear. He hadn't mastered the art of whispering. Secrets behind closed doors, and scrolled through emails, confirmations of evening meetings, reservations disguised as work appointments. The dates on the receipts were beating like drums. She created a folder with copies, sent them to a newly created email address, a common name, impossible to connect to her. She closed everything, returned everything to its place, and left only one difference: a leather diary open on the table, as if someone had consulted it in a rush. The next morning, her gestures were even gentler. She discreetly gathered 2 security guards in the lobby, and with the polite tone of someone concerned about the property's integrity, asked them to review the angles of the exterior cameras to improve insurance coverage, especially the side facing the garage and the service door. She mentioned a recent incident in the neighborhood, showed a newspaper clipping, and offered coffee. While they busied themselves with cables and monitors, She asked the housekeeper for a list of the staff's schedules, to reorganize their time off before the holiday. She received everything with a grateful smile, and in the afternoon drove to the remote neighborhood in a driverless rental car, sunglasses on, hair tied up casually. She parked 2 streets away, walked as if looking for an address, and recognized the building with the tired facade where the maid lived. She didn't go up. She stayed on the other side of the sidewalk, watching. A neighbor came out with a dog. Hand commented to himself about the broken elevator. She smiled, agreed with platitudes about the management, seized the opportunity to ask if it was always like this there, people coming in late. The man laughed, said that guy in the black car showed up every now and then corrected himself with a hurried apology. That was enough. She walked slowly back to the car, committing the streetscape to memory, and on the way back decided on the stage, the date, and the audience. There would be no intimate confrontation. There would be a mirror. Back at the mansion, he called the couple's publicist and, with the ease of someone discussing flowers, rescheduled a charity event for the following week at an art gallery where the press often lingered in search of perfect images. He said the theme would be transparency in relationships of trust, a flawless phrase in the context of philanthropy, but one that sounded like a whispered sentence when repeated in his head. Late in the afternoon, he came across the maid already setting the cutlery for dinner. He offered a simple compliment on the care taken at the table, asked if her family was well, and offered her Friday off, because you deserve to rest. He observed without judgment the brief fright in the young woman's eyes, a shadow of guilt that he tried to hide behind a grateful smile. His wife didn't take pleasure in that panic. She felt confirmation. Later, at dusk, she sat in front of the closet mirror and removed, one by one, the earrings, the necklace, the jewelry that had weighed down her chest since the toast. His watch sat on the vanity, engraved side up, like a metallic confession. She thought about the beginning of their marriage, the days when they still didn't know if they could afford to keep the house when everything was a promise, and the first employee they hired, a woman who taught them the magic of keeping a home together. The pain she felt now wasn't just from betrayal, it was from having allowed over time the house to become a stage and love to become diplomacy. She ran her finger over the inscription, Forever, L&M, and decided that forever could mean something else. Not eternity, but memory. On the morning of the second day, she discreetly received the insurance report with the new camera covers. From the side of the garage, the view was perfect. With the same composure, she asked her husband's assistant to confirm his presence at the gallery opening and to accept no excuses because the city needed to hear you. The assistant's voice trembled on the other end, but he complied. She then called a trusted journalist, commented on the event, and dropped an innocent comment about people who build images and forget about the behind the scenes. She didn't name names, didn't suggest a story, just offered a smile over the phone. The reporter knew those codes. That night, when she went to bed, she left his watch on the nightstand, next to where he slept, along with a neutral note. Forgot. It was a period deliberately placed mid-sentence. When he entered the room and found the cold metal reflecting his own expression, his stomach churned. His hand went automatically to his bare wrist. His heart fluttered between relief at having the object back and fear that the symbol had changed hands. She didn't ask where he'd been. She simply said goodnight and turned out the light. In the darkness, her silence had the density of a promise. In the days that followed, the change was so subtle that anyone less attentive would have sworn nothing had happened. She kept her routine intact. She woke up early, took care of social commitments, and managed the house with the same precision as always. But there were small, almost imperceptible variations that crept into her gestures. Instead of waiting in the living room when he arrived late, she began to remain in her bedroom, already in bed, with an open book she rarely read. Her good night came with the same polite intonation, but without the usual warmth. At breakfast, the small talk about appointments and meetings gave way to a polite silence, broken only by direct questions about practical matters. He, distracted by his own confidence that his secret was intact, failed to notice her watching his every move. The nervous tapping on his cell phone, the delay in his shower, the vacant look in his eyes when he thought he was alone. She also began to grow closer to the house staff, taking an interest in details she'd previously left to the housekeeper. She asked about schedules, shift changes, even each employee's mood. Her treatment of the maid was impeccable, almost affectionate, but always mediated by a calm that hid her intentions. The young woman in turn began avoiding eye contact, keeping her answers short, as if afraid any word might open a rift. Oblivious to this silent network forming around him, he attributed any coldness from his wife to fatigue or too many social events. He continued his suburban get-togethers, convinced he had erased all traces, and ironically this false security only made him lower his guard even further. Meanwhile, she rehearsed every step of what was to come, like a pianist repeating the same melody until every note sounds perfect. She watched him like someone studying a character, waiting for the moment when the right audience was gathered for the reveal. A moment that approached with the calculated slowness of a seemingly harmless tide until it swallowed everything. The first sign didn't come from someone close but from a distant acquaintance, one of those occasional presences that only appear at major events. It was during a charity cocktail party when a businesswoman, smiling as if sharing harmless gossip, mentioned seeing his car parked in a remote neighborhood, well off the business routes, as she made a point of emphasizing. His wife tilted her head with a look of mild curiosity, asked about the date, and smiled when she heard that it coincided with a night he'd said he was meeting with investors. The comment lingered, tinged with laughter, but etched like another point on the mental map she'd been plotting. In the following days, small comments appeared like shards of glass scattered across the floor. A close friend mentioned noticing he seemed distracted at recent dinners. A family acquaintance remarked that he'd seen him alone at a simple restaurant, strange for someone in his circle. All of this was said with the tone of someone who doesn't want to accuse, but also doesn't want the matter to drop. Experienced in this game of appearances, she fueled the rumors with surgical precision. She didn't invent anything. She simply dropped calculated glances, well-timed silences, and every now and then an ambiguous phrase about changing priorities or people rediscovering old habits. Those who listened would fill in the rest of the story themselves, and that was the effect she was aiming for. Their social circle, accustomed to observing signals like a radar, began exchanging information. Behind the scenes, versions varied. Some spoke of a marital crisis, others of secret negotiations, and some even suspected financial problems. None of these hypotheses were confirmed, but they all served the same purpose, to create an atmosphere of anticipation, as if everyone were waiting for a chapter that promised to be explosive. He, on the other hand, only noticed that some glances lingered longer than before, and that certain greetings carried a strange weight. He even commented to a friend that people were acting strange, but he didn't connect it to the double life he was leading. He was convinced he was in control, and this blind confidence was exactly what he needed to drive the plot to the point of no return. The social city they lived in was small, and rumors there had the power to become truths before they were even spoken. And at that moment, the pieces were already moving, silently, to form the perfect scenario. That night, the drive home began like any other. The car glided through the wet streets after another suburban rendezvous, and his body felt light, almost relaxed, lulled by the illusion that nothing could disturb this moment of silent satisfaction. The city lights reflected in the windshield like a parade of promises that repeated itself every time he returned from that forbidden address. An old song played softly on the radio, and for a moment he imagined the mansion already asleep, the lights off, his wife asleep, everything in its rightful place. But as he entered the gate, something in him hesitated. There was no movement from the security guards outside as he was used to, and the facade of the house was lit differently, as if the light was coming from within rather than from the usual external lighting. He parked and stood in the car for a few seconds, watching the slightly open curtains. He could see shadows moving even, though it was already too late for visitors. Opening the front door, he found the living room perfectly tidy, but with a heavier silence than usual. On the coffee table sat an arrangement of fresh flowers he couldn't remember seeing before, with a note in impeccable handwriting. "For tomorrow evening, be punctual." It was her signature. He walked through the house, calling his wife's name, but his voice echoed hollowly. In the bedroom, the bed was made as if no one had slept there. In the closet, however, there was a detail that made his stomach tighten. The watch he'd forgotten days before was back, in the same place she usually kept it, only face up, displaying the internal recording. Beside it, a tie he rarely wore. The very one she said she preferred when she wanted him to make a good impression. There was no note explaining, no message, just the weight of knowing she was up to something and that he had no idea what it was. Still, a part of him, arrogant and carefree, chose to interpret it as a gesture of silent reconciliation, ignoring the chill that was beginning to settle in the back of his mind. As he lay alone, he didn't realize that, from that moment on, his every step was already planned in the script she was writing in silence. The next morning brought clear skies, but for him the light seemed stronger than usual, almost uncomfortable. His wife greeted him in the living room with an impeccable smile, informing him that that evening they would be attending the opening of a new exhibition at the downtown art gallery. The invitation was already on the table, along with the tie she had left in the closet the night before. She told him it would be an important event for their image as a couple and that he shouldn't be late. There was no room for refusal. Her tone was sweet, but her choice of words sounded like an order. Throughout the day, he tried to convince himself that there was nothing more than social protocol behind the summons. However, the way she watched him, without lingering but with the certainty of someone measuring every reaction, left a shadow of unease. He spent the afternoon answering emails and reviewing contracts, but he couldn't help but wander to the maid's apartment. Part of him considered making up an excuse to miss the event, but prudence prevailed. He knew his wife wouldn't accept excuses. That evening, the driver took them to the gallery, a building with a classical facade, illuminated by spotlights that made the marble gleam. Upon entering, he noticed that the main room was packed. Journalists, photographers, and acquaintances milled about the sculptures and paintings, wine glasses in hand, discussing the evening as if it were just another prestigious event. But there was something different in the air, a subtle tension he couldn't quite put a name to. She led him by the arm to the center of the room, greeting people, introducing him to some guests he barely knew. With each introduction, she noticed discreet glances between them, as if a silent subtext were passing from person to person, until in front of an imposing glass sculpture, she excused herself to speak with the curator and left him alone for a few minutes. It was during this break that he noticed a reporter known for her ability to extract confessions from public figures. She approached with a professional smile, asking trivial questions about the exhibition, but quickly changed her tone, casually mentioning that the city has been talking about some business people's curious moves to less conventional areas. He tried to laugh, to change the subject, but the pressure in her voice revealed this was no mere journalistic curiosity. When his wife returned, she found them talking, and with the serenity of a perfect hostess placed her hand on his shoulder, turning to the reporter. "Tomorrow, at the end of the event, we'll have something interesting to share with the press. I think you'll like it." She said nothing more, just walked away, leaving a trail of anticipation that, in that atmosphere, was like gasoline waiting for a match. He didn't know it yet, but the trap was already sprung, and the night was far from over. The room was buzzing, glasses clinked, conversations overlapped, and the glow of cameras illuminated the gallery's white marble like a gala carpet. He tried to stay present, greeting acquaintances and commenting on the works, but he sensed a strange stiffness in the air,